Welcome back to Turning Hard Times into Good Times. I'm your host, Jay Taylor, and I'm really glad to have Dr. Quinton Hennigh, the President and CEO of Novo Resources, with me here once again today. Dr. Hennigh has been on this show numerous times over the past several years, so for many, if not most of you, he needs no introduction. For those of you who are not familiar with him, I suggest you do some quick homework starting at Novo Resources' website. That's novoresources.com. Before I say hello to Dr. Hennigh, I would like to tell you that Novo trades in Toronto under the symbol NVO. You can buy it in the U.S. as I have under the symbol NSRPF. There's 116.7 million shares outstanding, and it closed this past Friday in Canadian dollars at $3.60, in the U.S. at $2.87, giving a market capitalization of around $420 million in Canadian money or $332 million in U.S. money. There are, according to my records here, 160.1 million fully diluted shares. The company has some 14 million dollars in the bank, but I believe a lot of those shares are now starting to be turned into outstanding shares as many investors are starting to convert their warrants. At least that's my understanding. In any event, thank you for joining me today, Dr. Hennigh.
Thank you, Jay.
Your stock has exploded higher since mid-July when the markets caught on to the fact that you may have indeed found what you have personally been looking for over the past 13 years, namely a Witwatersrand type gold deposit. For listeners who may not be aware of what the Witwatersrand deposit means in terms of past gold production, can you talk about the size and significance of those South African gold fields and why finding another one, if indeed you have found something like that, would be very significant for Novo Resources shares?
Yeah, it's a good starting point. Look, the Witwatersrand Basin in South Africa is the most prolific gold field on Earth. It's produced roughly a third of the world's gold production over history. It was found in 1886. The deposit or deposits are hosted by sequences of sedimentary rock. In particular, there are conglomerate horizons that host considerable gold, but there's also this unique style of mineralization called a carbon leader, a very thin carbon seam that is very rich in gold as well. Both the conglomerates and the carbon leader have been mined continuously now for well over 130 years, I guess, and have produced at 1.6 billion ounces out of multiple mines. Okay, so to give you a perspective of size, the basin is about 300 kilometers long and about 150 kilometers wide. Quite sizable basin, but it's also a very significant basin because it's one of the oldest basins on Earth. If you look back to early Earth history, there was not much continental crust. There were not many continents or large blocks of land to deposit a sequence of rock like this. So it's a very, very unique setting. It's a very unique period in geologic history, as you know. Cyanobacteria evolved during that time. Oxygen came to be. My thoughts around the formation of these things. Mm-hmm. The Pilbara Craton here in Australia is the same age as the Capel Craton in South Africa, and it seems. My thesis for coming here is that it would be prospective for similar deposits. And as you know, we've been chasing conglomerate-hosted gold in the East Pilbara for several years now. We have the deposit at Beaton's Creek, and we have other occurrences at Marble Bar. But this area in the West Pilbara, this is the extreme northwest corner of Australia, it remained underexplored. There was really no mention of conglomerates out here, at least not significant conglomerate sections in the strata out here prior to this discovery. So this is it's a new deposit. Yes, it shares similarities to the Witwatersrand in some respects. Other respects, it's quite different. Very coarse gold. You don't see that in the Wits. Very, very what we call immature conglomerate, meaning clasts in the matrix and so forth of the conglomerate is very heterogeneous, like a lot of different rocks and stuff. Whereas the quartz, the conglomerates in the Wits are the quartz pebble type. Okay, so there's some distinct differences, but in terms of potential magnitude, I'm hoping that this discovery we've latched onto here could turn into something similar.
Could you talk a little bit about the prospective magnitude? I know that publicly you've talked about, I think it's 8 kilometers of strike along which I guess, according to my understandings, would be the sort of the shoreline of an ancient seabed perhaps, and that along those 8 kilometers there have been pretty predictable discoveries of gold nuggets using using metal detectors. Do I have that right? And could you just talk a little bit about what the prospective size of this might be? Underscoring the word might, because you're obviously in the very early days.
Look, so I was out at site today, spent all day there, and, there's prospectors out there. This is Saturday. People go out on the weekends, and they collect gold nuggets, using metal detectors, as you say. The area was intensely explored about, say, late last year, from the period of September through April or so. And people really swept the area hard. It's diminished somewhat, but what we have left behind are just millions, literally just millions of little holes in the ground where people have dug small gold nuggets. All right, so what this does is it kind of blazes a trail for us. We can look at the ground and we can go, holy cow, there's a lot of gold coming out of these rocks. And we can trace it along surface. So as you walk along the strike of the beds, this is where these things daylight, you just see one hole after another. And, people have asked me repeatedly, they say, well, is it concentrated in one part of the conglomerate section or this or that? Or, were we selective with their sample or what, whatever. There's a lot of people that speculate about how the gold is distributed and things. And look, from what I can see, people are digging up nuggets the whole way across the section. Okay, so the conglomerate horizon at Purdy's is about 11 meters thick or so. Elsewhere along strike, I think the maximum thickness is on the order of 20 meters. But there are also places where there's basement topography. The conglomerate actually rests on basement rocks. And the conglomerate might be a few meters thick, say 2-3 meters thick, something like that. So it kind of undulates. It pitches and swells along strike. But that said, it appears to be fairly continuous along strike. People have found nuggets literally the whole way, minus a little segment where there's a dike and there's some riverbed that covers up the thing. We found nuggets the whole way along, or dig holes the whole way.
Yeah, in fact, obviously a couple of the risks have to do with this continuity of mineralization as well as grade. And I think in one of your press releases you actually mentioned this, that the sort of consistency of these metal detectors discoveries along this 8-kilometer strike length might bode well, I guess, for the possibility of continuity, eh?
It does. We're very hopeful. Where we dug our trench, for example, it happened to be at the top of a hill. So when this thing occurs in the field, what you see is that the top of the unit forms a dip slope, what we call a dip slope. Like the hill's surface dips off and follows that top horizon fairly closely. But the other side of the hill, if you will, cuts down through the section. All right. So the reason we took the sample where we did is because it's flat at the top of the hill, and it was just easier to excavate at that particular spot. So there was no, we didn't horn in on, something that we saw as being potentially higher grade than anywhere else. We just grabbed a sample at the most convenient location. That said, there's a lot of work we need to do to show this thing is going to work. But there's some very important data that came back out of this trial that is encouraging. There is evidence based on the ore sorting process we used. There is evidence that there's a finer grain gold component, potentially disseminated mineralization between and around the nugget. Which could be very important. Think about it. If you're trying to drill a nuggety system, think of it like drilling a raisin cake. Your odds of hitting a raisin are so-so. But if you have, disseminated smaller raisins in between the big raisins, your odds are pretty good. So it could be potentially very helpful, this fine grain gold component.
Well, that's helpful in knowing that you weren't sort of cherry-picking your sample, is what I'm hearing you say, because when you come up with a grade like you did, what was the size of the sample?
Sure. When we collected it, we thought it was around 700 kilos, but, we're guessing out in the field. So we chucked the rock in two different drums that are each designed to hold about 350 kilos, something like that. And the samples ended up being, I think, 270-odd kilos. I think it talks about it in the news release. But, so collectively, I'd say the total sample weight was like 550 or 60 or 70 kilos, something like that. A little over half a ton. All right. But what's really interesting is you look at the photographs of the gold particles that were recovered out of each subsample. It's not as if one nugget was determining the grade of the sample. What you see is a a dozen or more little nuggets that constitute, the bulk of the gold in the sample. That's interesting. That says that we have a fair number of raisins in this raisin cake. Okay, so that helps in itself. But then off to the side of those pictures, you'll see little particles of fine gold. And that gold is also very important. It could help us, kind of smooth out the picture, if you will, when it comes time to talk about resource and continuity.
Mm-hmm. Well, I believe my friend John Kaiser did a little back-of-the-envelope calculation there and come up with something like 9.1 grams per ton from that sample. Out of 67, a little more than 67 grams per ton was the fine gold. So, obviously this is just one sample, but it's an amazing number when you think about it. I wonder if you don't think that maybe these kinds of numbers have fired up the market to the point where it is getting a little bit overzealous, a little bit overdone. We're certainly going to need to see, as you mentioned, lots and lots of work to be done yet before we can start to get a real scientific understanding of what's there.
I would say, it's a very speculative story. Obviously it has big potential, and I think the market's clued into that. Mm-hmm. But we haven't drilled a hole yet. Okay, so I would say it's had a pretty good run, given that we really have no drill holes, no trench sampling and so forth. There's lots to do, but at some point, out in the future, once we have some drilling going and trenching, there will be some hard numbers to hang our hat on. Right now, speculation driving things. I would say 3 months from now, hard numbers will be driving it.
Wow, that's really interesting. So that suggests that we're going to be seeing some pretty regular data coming out from assays and so forth. And how soon? I believe your bulk sample is being used in large part to help establish a sampling and assaying protocol. Is that right?
That's right. So we used a machine that sorts rock particles. So in the process, we crush the rock down to pieces smaller than 6 centimeters, which is a little over 2 inches. So pieces of rock down, or 2 inches and smaller, okay? Mm-hmm. And you feed it through this machine, which has an X-ray device on it. If anybody's put an X-rayed gold, like through an airport X-ray machine, it comes out dark black, because it's a very dense element. So the machine can pick up on those little gold nuggets all the way down to 2 millimeters. It can see very small nuggets. And it does a fantastic job of sorting those particles out from the rest of the material. Right, so that in itself reduces our sample size, at least our concentrate size, dramatically. Only 2% of the mass of the samples ended up having coarse gold particles in it. Right, so now this is important. Right, now we can use this machine and we can say, okay, let's sort it. Right. Produce a concentrate. We can assay that concentrate more or less in its entirety in some way, shape, or form. Perhaps green metallics or even aggressive cyanide lead, something like that. Mm-hmm. And then we can also assay the tailings. Okay, so the rock particles that did not get picked up by the machine, we can then crush and treat those almost like you'd treat a regular rock sample. We can do, for instance, a leach well assay or something like that. And then we can mathematically combine the numbers to produce a grade for that sample.
Wow. So is this possible that technology might be used in a mining? I know we're getting ahead of ourselves here, but if you're able to use that to get rid of as I understand it, non-gold-bearing rock, to be able to separate that out from the gold-bearing rock. And you mentioned in your press release that you could handle something like 48 tons per hour. That almost sounds like it's approaching some sort of commercial size.
These machines are actually developed to sort waste materials. Okay, so in either industrial waste or household waste, right? So the machines are actually designed to very quickly sort metal out from plastic or something like this, right? So they're actually designed for high throughput. The machines that they use for ore sorting are modified somewhat, but they do it very quickly. We put our sample through the machine. I think it took all of about 10 or 12 seconds for the thing to process, one of the 250 or 60 kilo of samples. All right, so just whack, it's done. It's like, wow, that's amazing. Does it have commercial application? Quite potentially. Okay. Very, very interesting. Here we have a deposit where we have a very, very serious coarse gold issue, but now we're talking about a machine that can literally, at very fast speed, sort out rock particles that have, metallic gold in them. That's amazing. This could be a very significant breakthrough for us at some point.
Wow, that is quite exciting, and certainly something we'll be watching for sure. Getting back to the idea of the potential size of this, in our last discussion, last time you were on this radio show, you talked about a deep hole that was put down. Well, I think it must be something like 50 kilometers down dip south of Purdy's Reward, where you currently you took that recent sample. And as I recall, that you said that graded something like 12 grams per ton at a depth of something like 1,700 meters, if I remember correctly.
Yes.
How much do you know about that drill intercept and what the nature of the gold in it was? Do you have any understanding of that?
Sure. The report is actually publicly available. It was a hole drilled by CRA, which is an Australian company. They drilled it looking for they were interested in gold, obviously, but they were also looking at other potential economic minerals. I think they were looking at diamond and uranium as well. The total depth was 2,200 meters or so. It was a vertical hole. It went straight down through the entire sedimentary and volcanic sequence. Mm-hmm. And it went into the basement rocks at the end. All right, so most of the hole was in the volcanic and sedimentary rocks that we see at Purdy's. Mm-hmm. It hit this reef that you mentioned, or horizon, at about 1,756 meters, I believe it was. And it hit. They had one assay out of there that ran 11.7 grams per ton. Now, the rock, the photographs from that core, we've seen them. The interval that ran is a kind of a pebbly, sandy conglomerate, and the class in the conglomerate, looks similar to a lot of material we see at Purdy's. It's kind of a mix of volcanic rocks and whatnot. So there's similarities, albeit the conglomerate is a smaller class size, like the cobbles are smaller. Mm-hmm. But it does share similarities. Now, the gold in that sample, they didn't make mention of visible gold, like they didn't see a nugget. Okay, but they did do a repeat assay on the core when that first value came back, and they re-assayed it and repeated. So we're confident the gold is in there. What's really interesting is CRA, for some reason, did not systematically sample the entire core down the hole. So they only took select samples here and there. I think they took 300 and some odd samples. So we can't speak volumes about, the potential up and down the hole. One thing is interesting, though. In the log, they mentioned towards the bottom of the hole, there is what they call a basaltic conglomerate. It's comprised of basalt class. It's very rich. Well, Purdy's Reward and Comet Well, the conglomerate we have, is very rich in basalt class. All right. Now, funny enough, I don't see assay data from that bottom. That's way down towards the bottom of the hole. It's right above basement, and that's where Purdy's Reward is. It's sitting right on basement. All right. So it's intriguing. We see at least enough to be dangerous. I'm not going to say we can avoid anything, but the fact that they hit gold and they're seeing lithologies that are similar is very, very intriguing.
Indeed, it seems to be. Well, it's my understanding, Quinton, that the Pilbara craton or basement rocks where Novo was exploring in that general area, that this has been a very geologically speaking, a very quiet area for a very long period of time. Does that bode well for the potential for these structures remaining in place? I would think. I mean, if you had a lot of seismic activity, a lot of earthquakes and things going on, you would be breaking up and having more faulting and so forth. As an amateur geologist here, am I thinking correctly about that? There
is a lot of truth. The Pilbara is a remarkable place. You think back and you think, gee, this rock's been here for 2.79 billion years. And it's been skittering around Earth. It's been in all sorts of latitudes and, bounced around. But the darn stuff is still flat as a pancake, or near flat. It's just amazing. It's a freak show. The Pilbara is unique.
Yeah. So, time will tell. Any ideas or any plans to do any deep drill holes? I know your focus has to be right now on what's at the shoreline or what's on surface there. But do you expect that you may be putting a couple of deep holes down somewhere just to sort of check this geology?
Yeah. That's a good question. We're bouncing a lot of ideas around about how we're going to approach this right now. It's clear that we have to do large diameter drilling to get representative samples, or at least samples that are somewhat representative, we'll say. All right, so that's a given. But we are looking at ways we could kind of like, we'll treat it like a triage approach, okay? We could go out and drill some core holes that we call strat holes just to poke down and see what rocks we're dealing with prior to large diameter drilling. And that way we can kind of, at least have a peek at what the rocks we're getting into look like, right? And then when we drill our large diameter hole, we can be better prepared to know where the potential target is and how we're going to drill through it, where we're going to take samples, et cetera, et cetera. So, look, there's a lot we don't have set in stone yet. We're working on the drill program as we speak. Are we going to drill deep holes? Yes, in time we definitely will. If we want to show this thing could be a very large gold system like we hope, we have to be bold and step out into the basin and drill some holes.
Quinton, I noticed last week you announced you picked up a bit more ground out there. I saw on your website you're talking about something like 10,000. What is your target there? 10,000 square kilometers or something like that. I mean, last I saw you had something over 9,000 square kilometers. Are you nearly finished in your land accumulation program there?
A lot of people ask that. Okay, so geology is an iterative process. All right, we go out, we learn, we come back, we think about it. Maybe we should look at this. Maybe we should look at that. Am I going to say we're done picking up land? Yeah, not quite. Okay. But am I going to tell anybody what we're thinking? No. Okay. So it's just going to be one of those exercises in patience. We're learning just as much, every day as we were back in June. Okay. I mean, like literally we're learning a lot every day.
Sure.
We look around and we decide what might be a valuable asset to us. And I approach the owners. It's a very nice place to work because a lot of the owners are local. And I can go have a beer with them at a pub.
Yeah.
The guy we just struck a deal with, I had fish and chips with him at the Point Sampson pub last Friday. We shook hands. We got a deal done. It's that simple.
The old-fashioned way, huh? And the lawyers, we don't want them to mess it up, but at the same time, we want to protect ourselves because it certainly is, as somebody's pointed out, one of the risks inherent anytime you find a huge amount of gold, if that's in fact what's underway here, greed starts to come into the picture and people start to find reasons to believe that they should have it and not you.
Look, we, everything is coming together favorably. We would like to hope that continues.
Let me ask you, before I let you go, one question about Beaton's Creek, because as you know, I've been following your story for the last 4 years or so. And Beaton's Creek, until this latest nugget discovery, Beaton's Creek was your primary focus, and I think you're still saying it is. But where does that stand now? Because that in itself looked interesting to me and looked promising to me. I know a lot of people didn't pay much attention to Novo until the nugget story surfaced, but you're moving forward with a feasibility study, or at least you were before this latest excitement took place. What can you tell us about your plans for Beaton's Creek now? And I know that you had signed a memorandum of understanding with Sumitomo for them to come in and use some of their expertise to help you there. But could you comment just briefly on what your plans are for Beaton's Creek?
Certainly. Look, our plans have not changed. You'll notice that our team has grown quite a bit. Brought in a new CEO a couple of months ago. He's a huge help, great guy, Rob Humphreyson. And he is helping me bring yet further staff on board. And we are moving Beaton's Creek forward just like we said to the market back in May when we did our raise for $15 million. We have a lot of drill data and trench data that's currently coming back. I put a release out about 2 weeks ago talking about an update, if you will, of Beaton's Creek. We will have a resource put together, say by mid-September, get that out, and then proceed with our PFS. So everything's on track there. We are working with Sumitomo, and we would be delighted if they decided to come in and help finance that operation.
All right, well, we're just about out of time now, but how well funded are you, and what should people be watching for? I mean, next couple of weeks or so, what might we expect to see coming from your press releases?
Yeah, sure. Look, we have about $15 million, as you said. Warrants are in the money, so we're seeing some of that money come in on a routine basis at this point. We do have some warrants that will come in September. We reckon the news flow over the next few weeks. We plan on consummating the Artemis joint venture deal in the near term. We plan on announcing commencement of trenching and drilling sometime later this month or early September. Lots of news coming. Okay, there's potential land deals. There's a few other things, but we'll leave it at that.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Quinton, and all the best to you. It's my largest shareholding, so I'm watching this with more interest than anything else that I follow, and it is really an exciting story. Thank you for all your hard work and your persistence in hanging on to this, moving it forward. It's really exciting. Thanks very much. I hope we can talk to you again sometime soon.
Thank you, Jay.